You're now listening to All Hog Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimpson.
This Saturday, September 4th, Rice edge Arkansas at Donald W. Reynolds Beck Razorback Stadium. It's at 1 p.m.
Now, for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Now, last season, the Hogs went 3-7, but I really don't think that's true and indicative of the amount of progress they made in one season. Now, the number one thing to watch out for this Saturday is a new offense with KJ Jefferson. KJ brings a dual threat ability. I talked about him a lot in my breakdown and what he does best, but I do expect a lot more runs this year from the quarterback. And then I also expect a higher RPO rate. I wouldn't be shocked if the game plan against Rice has about 35% of the playbook being RPOs. And just really have a good start to the season anytime that you play an easier opponent. That's obviously a little simpler to do. And it's just important for KJ to get out there, get good reps, and really look his best. And another question is, who performs best in the wide receiver room? Now, Traylon Burks is questionable for the game. I'm not sure if he's going to play or not. Gut instinct says no, just to save him for the Texas game next week, which will be a huge game. But also, you may want to put him in there for like a drive or so and get him some reps. But the guys I see rising in the wide receiver room is Tyson Morris and Davion Warren. Warren now healthy off his ACL injury and was listed as a starter on the depth chart. And then Tyson Morris is a really interesting pick. He had a lot of reps with KJ on the second team offense last season. I like his chemistry with KJ, and just last season when we saw him, he looked pretty good. And then for the other wide receivers, you got Ketron Jackson and Jaquaylin Crawford. And the big question here is, will talent turn into production? When I list off guys like Crawford, Jackson, Warren, Morris, Bryce Stevens is a name to watch out for. These guys are all really talented. There's no denying that. But there's some guys who, when they put the uniform on, they perform better. And KJ does that. Something that Coach Ken O'Brien, the offensive coordinator, has said, is some guys just are that way. So will that talent turn into production, and for who will it be? Now, the offensive line and pass protection is key as well. All guys are 6'4" and over 300 pounds. Brady Latham beat out Jones for the starting position, and Stromberg is back as center. Those are just two updates from my last offensive line preview episode when I looked at that position group. Really, if this unit performs like they did in the Mizzou game all year, I think we'll have a lot of time for KJ to manage in the pocket, make accurate deep balls, and such. Ultimately, the offensive line will be an anchor of the entire offensive system. I do expect a better year, though, as guys are in better shape. A lot of returning starts. I think 9 out of 10 of the starting deep is coming back. And then you added Tyquise Crawford, a valuable pickup in case somebody goes down to injury, and a future starter down the line. I'm interested to see if we see any two tight end sets. That's something that the offensive coordinator, Browse, talked about a little bit. Something he's not really used to running. Now, Blake Kern did win the tight end one spot over Hudson Henry. Last year, there's a lot of oars in that position, but it's clear that Kern will be the tight end one. And then, rounding out the offense, you got Raheem Sanders making his first start. I'm anticipating him getting at least like 20 yards or such, especially if they put the second teamers out there with Malik Hornsby. I'm really interested to see him play because just players have raved about him, coaches just talking about how elusive and versatile he is. Now, flipping it over to the defensive side of the ball. Arkansas has a revamped defensive line. 3 out of 4 of the guys listed on the first team on the depth chart are all transfers. Now, this week, John Ridgway, the transfer from Illinois State, will be out. I'd look for returning players such as Isaiah Nichols, who got a lot of starts last year, and then Tareen Carter to pick up those spots for Ridgway. And then Gerald, starting at the Jackies, the one returning starter. The other 2 transfer defensive linemen are Trey Williams at defensive end, and then Marco Uzi at defensive tackle. I was a little bit shocked Uzi won over Gregory, just because Gregory's edge rush is probably better than Uzi's, but Uzi also has a little bit of size, which is much needed in the SEC. Something that Gregory still has is that size, though. It's not really that big of a difference. I see both of those people contributing at defensive tackle. I'm interested to see if we go 3 or 4 down sets as well. Last year, I don't think the defense had the depth to go 4 enough, but I think this year, especially once Ridgeway gets back, 4-man fronts are very possible and will make a costly impact on just the whole defensive, giving secondary less time to have to, wait for the ball to get out there and such. Now, a very interesting part of the depth chart was actually the linebacker 2 spot is Bumper Pool or Hudson Henry. Bumper Pool, the all-SEC second-teamer, returning for the year. Henry looked really good during fall camp. Bumper, looking like he did last year, though, pretty solid as well. I did not expect an or here. I thought it was Bumper's job. And I think the main thing to watch out for during this game, when you see Hayden and Bumper in the game, because they will both get a decent number of reps, is just being able to have a high effective tackling rate, don't have missed tackles, and then coverage, something that linebackers from Arkansas struggled with a little bit last year. Now, Ladarius Bishop won the CB2 spot over Hudson Clark, so he's starting mainly coverage, just not getting beat. And like I said, he runs a 4.35, so I'm not really too worried about that. Ketelon and Fouché at safety. Get Great Morgan, Monteric Brown, and then I forgot to talk about Treeland Smith on defense. But all those guys, solid returning starters. I talked about them a lot in my previews. They should all contribute on their side of the ball. And then Cam Little gets his first start as kicker, the true freshman. Ideally, you want a perfect day out of him. Maybe one missed kick, not a big deal. I do expect him, though, to make all of them. He's just that way. Now, Arkansas's game is
versus
the Rice Owls. The Rice Owls went 2-3 last year. They lost their top quarterback, so they kind of got a double QB system per their head coach, Mike Bloomgren. You actually coached Luke McCaffrey's cousin, Christian McCaffrey. You may know him. Luke McCaffrey, though, the transfer from Nebraska, his biggest threat is on the ground and just QB draws. He's got really good legs. I mean, it just kind of runs in the family, that running ability. He had a 65% completion rate last year in Nebraska. However, his interception to touchdown ratio was 2-1, so he's throwing double the amount of interceptions as picks, and it landed him on the bench. He transferred to Louisville over the summer, but right before fall camp, he transferred over to Rice, so he's still picking up that offense, and when you see him in there may be a little bit of miscommunication and such. Now, the other quarterback is Willie Green, the previous starter before 2020. 2019 season starts for Green. Their head coach said that neither guy really separated themselves in practice, and I see this being a good thing for Arkansas. I think a lot of times when you have two quarterbacks going into a game, it just doesn't work. Quarterback is not one of those positions where you can say, okay, if this guy doesn't perform good, we're going to put this guy in, just because everything on offense revolves around the quarterback, and then the locker room revolves around the quarterback. You have to pick a starter in my eyes. I feel like I'm kind of repeating, what everybody criticized about Chad Morris and the fact that we just never had a starter and it was always the or. I understand the or situation with McCaffrey. I'm not saying anything about Holmgren, but I'm just saying in general, you want to have a solid starter and roll with one guy. And I see that being a plus for the Razorbacks at Rice. Has a kind of two quarterback thing going on. Now, outside the quarterback position for the Owls is Jordan Myers at wide receiver. He led the team with 24 catches, so they're returning their number one wide receiver. Jack Bradley at tight end, and then Jake Bailey in the slot. Now, their third wide receiver position goes to Bradley Rosner. And this guy's going to be the wide receiver one for the Owls. He was a second-team All-Conference USA player, according to Phil Steele in 2019. He opted out of the 2020 season after he suffered an injury in October, and Rice only ended up playing 5 games, so he wasn't healthy enough to play in those. He had 770 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 55 catches. A stud transfer from JUCO. I do see this being the guy that Monteric Brown primarily guards, and then I see Ladarius Bishop going on Jordan Myers in a 1v1 situation there. If you go with 3 corners, you probably put Hudson Clark on Bailey, possibly. You could put Devin Bush, Greg Brooks, a lot of different options around for the Razorbacks. Now, Rice returns all 5 offensive linemen. They return all top 4 rushers. Main rusher would be Kalen Griffin. Should be taking RB1 reps. Now, their linebacker core is deep and returns a lot of starters. 7 out of 8 of the top tacklers return for the Owls. They lost one linebacker, and that was Blaze Alridge. He transferred to Missouri. We'll probably see him as a starting linebacker for the Tigers later this season. All their secondary returns. And the question I think a lot of people bring themselves when they see the word returning starter is, okay, so the returning starters, they should be good. But you have to factor in returning starters on a team that went 2-3 and struggled to really control the clock and control the game in almost all 4 games outside of the Marshall game. I mean, they won the Southern Miss game too. Southern Miss wasn't good though. They ended up firing their head coach. I think Rice will be a good team. You know, obviously, I think the game will be played within like 20-ish points, and I'll talk about that later. But anytime you have returning starters, regardless of how the team performed last year, means a lot because you can't beat experience on the football field, especially in week 1. Their pass rush is kind of weak, though, from what I've watched. However, defensive tackle DeBraylon Carroll, I think he'll be a name for the Hogs to watch at defensive tackle. But, I mean, you got Ricky Stromberg taking care of him. Not too worried about them. But just overall, Rice returns a lot of starters. Last year, they really struggled to, like I said, control the games. It kind of felt like, you know, they were always pushing from behind. They never were able to control the clock. The defense struggled a lot. So, not many guys went pro as a result. Guys return, COVID year. All of those put together a pretty experienced team in general. So, the Hogs also got one too. You know, 19 out of 21 starters, I think, might be 18 now. Now, the spread opened at Arkansas minus 21.5 per ESPN. Right now, it's sitting at Arkansas minus 19.5. Possibly to do something with the injuries. I don't know really if Burks is going to play or not. So that's anyone's best guess. Sometimes you can read from the spread, but I wouldn't take anything here. I think Burks will just kind of have to go through the week and see how he performs, was something that Pittman talked about. I don't have the injury report in today's episode just because it's week 1 and most of your guys are healthy. But for week 2, 3 going forward, that segment will return. Arkansas has a 94.6% chance of winning per ESPN FPI, and the over-under number on total points scored is set at 50. Now, the all-time history between these two teams. I have never watched Arkansas play Rice before because this is their first game since the Hogs left for the SEC. Rice was the old Southwestern Conference opponent, I guess sometimes considered a rivalry to some. Arkansas leads the series, though, 35-29. Arkansas has won 10 out of 11 of the past games since 1981, so it's been rather one-sided as Arkansas's program kind of set apart from Rice's and then accordingly moved to the Southeastern Conference.
It's time for Sam's prediction. Sam's prediction.
I got the Hogs winning this one 38-21. I think the Hogs win because we control the tempo of the game. This is just done by having the offense not as dynamic, getting less 3-and-outs. I do see KJ playing till the fourth quarter. I think Malik comes in, though, and relieves him in some garbage time. Hogs win also by winning in the trenches. Bully ball is something that Pittman talks about playing, and with Nichols, I'm not too worried about him going up against Rice. The whole offensive line is healthy. Should give KJ a solid 3-4 plus seconds to work in the pocket. And really just taking it week by week. Something that Josh Pate, he's a podcaster for 247 Sports, I just kind of give him credit on this idea, is the idea that Arkansas plays a tough schedule. That is true. However, it's important to see it as one game as a week. We don't play Bama, Georgia, A&M, like back-to-back. That's not just how the schedule's made. We play Rice. After that, you play Texas, then Georgia Southern. You take it week by week so you don't overwhelm yourself. And it's important not to overlook opponents, especially with G5. I've seen a couple Hog fans talking about,